Once again, let me give you another formal welcome here. This is this week's Webinar Wednesday e-demo presentation entitled Conquering Your Data Management Challenges with Enterprise PDM. Again, my name is Miles Safin. I'm a PDM specialist with Hawk Ridge Systems. Been with Hawk Ridge for about 2-3 years. And in that time, I've garnered a very, very large amount of experience with PDM in general, especially with EPDM. So over the next 45 minutes to an hour, I'll be showing you the ins and outs of Enterprise PDM for this demonstration. So we'll go ahead and just get started. So first and foremost, with Enterprise PDM, the point is to have a secure, revision-managed area for all of your files, for your production files. Now, instead of launching any shortcut from my desktop to get into some sort of proprietary browser or anything like that, I'm just going to go into my C drive here. And as you can see, here's my just normal list of folders, but I also have a couple special folders here. These are views to my individual vaults. This is how I access the files that are in my vaults. I'm going to double click on one of them, and it's going to bring up a login screen here, allowing me to enter my name and a password. What's really cool about this feature is that you can actually sync this up with your Active Directory logins, your domain logins for Windows. So you can make it so that you don't actually have to type in a password again. Once you're logged into Windows, it's just going to read in those credentials and allow you to log in. I don't have that set up right now. I'm just going to enter, leave my name entered in here. I don't have a password set up either, so I'm just going to go ahead and log in. And as you can see, my view of Windows Explorer is sort of split out a bit. Up top here, I have just a list of folders here that I can browse through and view different files. And here, as you can see, some SOLIDWORKS files. And down here, I have this sort of split view of different things. We'll go over that in a little bit later. But as you can see, I have some SOLIDWORKS files in this particular folder here. I can browse over to one of my other folders, and as you can see, I have an Excel file here, a couple PDFs, and a PowerPoint file. You can pretty much store any file type in Enterprise PDM that you want. It's built to be an add-in to Windows Explorer rather than, like I said, its own proprietary browser. You have to sort of obey that browser's rules. Anything you can store in Windows Explorer, you can store in the Vault. And I could sort of browse around and view different bits of information in these columns here for my files. So I'll go back to my SOLIDWORKS files here, and I could see I have my files listed out here in terms of their serialized numbers, but I also have the descriptive names listed here in these columns, also the revision column telling me what revision each individual file is at, if it does have a revision. All these columns are completely customizable by your administrator, whoever actually sets up the vault. So whatever is actually most relevant for you in terms of textual information pertaining to the file, custom properties, or metadata, as you might say, you can have that displayed up top here. Now, whatever I actually select up top here is actually going to update my view of things down here at the bottom of my screen. I'm actually going to start talking about this bottom section, starting off with the data card here. Data cards you could think of them as pretty much the backbone of your vault. The point of them is to store all of that metadata, that relevant textual information for all of your files in one central location for each file. So as you can see here, I have this miter saw assembly selected here. It's telling me what the assembly number is, pulling in that name, what the description is, which is what's driving the description column here. It's telling me what revision it is, what document number it is, how much it weighs, the date it was created, its cost, etc. So these data cards are also completely customizable, just like the columns up top here. If you don't like the vendor selection here, go ahead and get rid of it, delete it, move it around, whatever you'd like. If you don't like the picture of the SO logo here, the SOLIDWORKS logo, delete that, get rid of it, put your own logo in there, completely change the look of this. It's all a drag and drop interface that your administrator would actually configure. So not only can you configure the look, but you can configure what properties, what metadata is actually saved on those data cards here. So it's a really, really handy feature. And again, driving a lot of the features, as we'll see when we go through the remainder of this vault, that Enterprise has. So again, that is essentially known as like the backbone of your vault here. The next thing I'm going to show you is this preview tab, and this is a really, really cool feature here. So as you can see, I still have my miter saw assembly selected, and it's actually allowing me to preview it in the eDrawings interface here, allowing me to manipulate the view of this particular item in 3D space. On the right side of my screen, I can see the other bits of metadata that I have defined to view here, so I can sort of see a summary of that data card information for the file that I'm looking at. And this isn't specific, though, to SOLIDWORKS files. I can actually go back to my other folder here, and maybe I want to preview my Excel file or one of the PDFs or the PowerPoint file. What's really, really cool about this previewer is that it previews over 250 different file types without the parent program needing to be installed. In this particular case, I don't need my Office suite installed to actually view this Excel in its entirety here. And what's also very cool is the fact that it's a selectable preview. So I have this particular cell selected here. I can right-click on it and select copy, and then I could just paste that information up top here. Here's that information that was just copied from that Excel preview. Really, really handy feature, allowing people who don't have maybe SOLIDWORKS or don't even have Office or any other parent program to have visibility into the Vault. If they have the enterprise client installed, they'll be able to log into the Vault and basically look at any file in there and have at least some sort of visibility. The next thing that I want to talk about is going to be this version tab here. And for this, I'm going to switch back to that miter saw assembly just to give you a bit of an example of what's going on here. So a concept to be familiar with in terms of PDM is the fact that when you take ownership of a file, you're checking it out, and you're checking it out to yourself so nobody else can actually make changes to it. Every time you make changes to a file in Enterprise PDM and check in those changes, essentially release your ownership and add the changes to the Vault, you're going to create what's known as a version. In this particular instance, again, I have my miter saw assembly selected, and my version tab is reporting to me that my local version is 10 and the latest version is 10. So it's telling me that 10 total versions of this file have been made, and the latest one is on my local cache, my local computer, is actually version 10. I have the option to very easily get any other version from my Vault locally by just a simple couple of clicks here. As you can see, I now have version 7 of 10 on my local cache. It's important to realize that when you're working with any PDM system, especially Enterprise PDM and Workgroup PDM to a degree, you're always working locally. You're always working locally in terms of the files that you have on your hard drive, but every time you make changes and save them and check those in, you're actually syncing those changes back to the server. So if I was to check this file out and make changes to it, I would create a new version, and then I could potentially check that new version into my Vault and create maybe a version 11. Now it's also telling me that the local revision of this file is F. If I go back and I wanted to sort of review all the revision history and version history, I could very easily do that through here. As you can see, I've stamped this file with a number of revisions, and they don't always coincide with the versions. As you can see, my revision A here was stamped on version 5. Now, the reason we want both versions and revisions is to control who can see what. Generally, your versions are the ones that your designers need to see. They're the work in progress copies of the file. There's changes being made at certain times between revisions, so you want your designers to see those files. But revisions, you only really want to share those to your manufacturing team or some sort of outside team that only needs to see the latest and the greatest revision. Your revisions are sort of like your special versions. And a huge advantage that Enterprise PDM has is the fact that every single change that you make to a file, even if it's a small custom property change or it's a large design change, all those changes get logged as new versions. So you never just have one working copy. You can very, very easily track any changes that have been made in the history of a file, and very, very easily as well get any one of those changes locally to your hard drive and open them up in SOLIDWORKS and view what happened at that specific version. Very, very handy feature there. Move on here to the Bill of Materials tab. What this is doing is just pulling in that Bill of Materials information from the SOLIDWORKS file, giving me a good idea of the tree of information for this particular file in terms of the references, what's comprising this particular assembly, how many instances of individual components reside in this particular file. I have the option to view different versions of the bill of materials. If I wanted to take a look at version 5, I can just as easily do that, as well as any other version. If I wanted, I can save this bill of materials out as a CSV file or a named bill of materials in my vault. The advantage of doing a CSV file is you can have it open up in Excel. And then from Excel, obviously, you can manipulate this file to create your true bill of materials and maybe export this to another area where this can be maybe read in or something like that. I have the option to also compare my bill of materials to different versions. I can compare the latest bill of materials version to my previous one very easily. What I'll do is compare my version 10 bill of materials with my version 3. And as you can see, it looks like some of the components have changed in terms of the revision. Those changes are highlighted here. So a couple of handy features here in the bill of materials section. The next tab I want to show you is the Contains tab here. So I still have my miter saw assembly open here. It's selected. And this Contains tab is again showing me the tree of information for this particular file, showing me all the references that are comprising this particular assembly in terms of the downstream of information, what is present in terms of references inside this file. If I clicked on the Where Used tab, I wouldn't get much information because what this is doing is trying to tell me where in Enterprise PDM this particular file is used in terms of references. If I select another component, though, maybe a subcomponent like a part, such as this bracket here, this would tell me in terms of the Where Used tab where this file is used. So I can see very easily that this file, this bracket, is used in this particular assembly, and this assembly is also used in this parent assembly, that miter saw assembly that we've been taking a look at here. It's important to note that EPDM uses what's known as SQL to manage the references and the metadata and whatnot, and anything that's pretty much non-design, non-actual physical data. The advantage of using SQL in this regard is that I can have that information easily referenceable, and it gets to me very, very quickly in terms of any search interface or anything like that. But what's really cool about this is that I can take any one of these files. Let's say I'll take this file here, this bushing, and I know this is present in this particular assembly, which is present in this assembly. I can actually either move or rename this file, or a combination of both, to a different folder with a different name, and it won't break the reference to my assembly that's located here. The reason, again, this is doing that is because you have SQL managing all the metadata, all the references, all the file names. And very commonly what you would have to do, let's say if you're using a map network drive or using something that's not a PDM system and you need to rename a file or move a file to a different folder, you would have to open up that parent assembly and then repoint the reference to that subcomponent. With Enterprise PDM, you don't have to do that. You can move the file freely around any folder inside the Enterprise PDM vault, or feel free to rename it to whatever you would like, and it will still maintain the reference. For example, what I could do is go ahead and take a look at this assembly here, which is present in this drawing. If I wanted to, I can right-click on this file and rename it. Maybe I'll add another trailing 0 to it just as an example. And as you can see, here's that same file. It's still present in this drawing here in terms of the reference. If I opened up this drawing, it would still pull in the assembly. None of the other references would break because, again, you have SQL managing those references. So it really doesn't matter what you rename the file or where you move it to. It's still going to maintain those references. So let me go ahead and rename this back here. Now, what I want to do is sort of step back from the Explorer interface and actually put myself in the shoes of a normal designer. What I want to do is actually make some edits to a particular drawing as myself, and then what I'm going to do is make use of the Enterprise PDM add-in within SOLIDWORKS here. So let's say I want to make some edits to this yoke/saw pivot drawing. I'll go ahead and double-click on it. It's going to prompt me with a window asking me if I want to check out this file, which again means to take ownership of this file. So I'll go ahead and do that. I do want to take ownership of this file because I intend on making some changes and adding a new version into the vault, and perhaps even submitting my file for review by my superior. So there's a couple things that I want to do with this particular drawing here, but before I get to that, I'll show you around the interface here. I have the same options as I do in Explorer, more or less. I can get previous versions. I can still check my file in or out from this interface. And I can actually bring up that data card as well by clicking this button here. Let's say I want to make some changes. I'll change the description maybe of this. Well, you know what? Actually, I'll change the vendor. I'll do that instead. I'm going to set the vendor to this value right here, 8020 Incorporated, and click OK. I just want to show you the bidirectional interface that you have here. I'm going to go to the custom properties of this file here. And as you can see, my vendor was updated to 8020 here. This wasn't present here before. I just set that on the data card there. But just to show you an additional example of that bidirectional activity that's going on, I'm going to rename the description here instead of the data card. So I'll just maybe change this to yoke pivot. I'll click OK here, and I'll bring that data card back up through my EPDM add-in. And as you can see, the description updated here. So again, any updates that you make from one area will update in the other area. And what's really, really cool about this is that you could potentially make these updates outside of Enterprise PDM outside of SOLIDWORKS without having the file open. And maybe if you have a custom property mapping to a drawing, which this has, let's say this description is mapped to the description custom properties, which is then mapped to this drawing, as you can see right here, it is. This can potentially update something that's on the drawing without you actually having to open it up in SOLIDWORKS. That's a really nice time-saving feature there. Last change I'll make, maybe I want to take this drawing view here and move it over to the left. Maybe I think it looks a little bit better on the left there. So I'll just OK those changes, save my work. And I'll check in my changes here. So I'll get another check-in window, and it's actually going to confirm that I'm increasing the version of the file in my vault here, and I'll select check-in. Now I don't have any more access to it anymore. It's back in a read-only state. I do have the option to check the file out if I want to, but I'm done working for now. I'll go ahead and just close this out. The last thing I want to do, though, before I continue on, is actually submit my changes for review to my superior. I have a boss in my company named Mark. I want to submit the changes to this drawing for his review, because maybe he could then approve it and stamp it with a revision, or he could reject the changes and then I have to go back and work again. But I'm fairly confident that the changes that I made should be fairly sufficient. So I'll go ahead and actually right-click on this and actually change the state of this. This is where we're actually going to get into the process of workflows. So I have the option here to actually submit this for approval if I want to. But before we actually get to that, let me go to my administration tool here. This is something that your SOLIDWORKS Enterprise PDM administrator would actually see in terms of its daily working process. This is what's known as a workflow. As you can see, it looks like a very simple flow chart of information here. What this is telling me is that I can either have 4 states for my files for the normal design process and maybe a couple states for any analysis that goes on. Any files that are checked into my vault go into what's known as a work in progress state. And the fact that I have states and transitions to those states allows me to control permissions in terms of who can see what, who can edit what when files are in different states. Ideally, when files are in a work in progress state, which those files, those bottom files are in, including the drawing that I just worked on, as you saw, I was able to check the drawing out, work on it, make changes, and check those changes in. But I do have the option to submit this drawing for approval. That was that change state operation that we just saw not too long ago. And once it goes into here, what's going to happen is it's going to remove my permission to actually check out the file, because ideally when files are being reviewed, you do not want your designers to actually check those files out and then make changes to them in any way. You want them to be just solely in a read-only state so that maybe people can review changes inside of SOLIDWORKS and either approve or reject them. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and right-click on this file again, and I will submit this file for approval. And maybe I should make a couple comments here because of the fact that, hey, I made a few decent changes, nothing really huge, but I want to make sure that I log my comments, my changes in here. So I'll say maybe I updated the properties of my drawing. And I also changed the 3D view in the top left of the screen. I'll make sure I actually spell my words correctly there. I also have the option to enter a notification comment. I can notify a user via the database email system. Specifically, I want to email Mark and let him know that, hey, this file is ready for review. That way, when Mark logs into his Enterprise Vault the next time, he'll get a little pop-up that says that I've transitioned a file into the pending approval state and that he should be able to review it. So I'll just give him a little heads up that I specifically want him to review the file. So I'll just say, please review, Mark. I'll go ahead and click OK. And as you can see, in this column, the state updated from work in progress to pending approval. Just to illustrate the example of the file access, I no longer have access to actually check out the file, which is, again, intended. I am a normal designer. I'm logged in as myself, Miles. I shouldn't have access to files in terms of checkout access that are in the pending approval state or any real review state. So what I'm going to do is now log out of my Enterprise PDM as myself, and I'll log in as Mark. I'll step into Mark's shoes. Mark is not a real person. He is just a fictitious person here, but I'll go ahead and log in as him. Mark is a reviewer in my particular vault, and it looks like, as you can see here, gotten a few notifications. I'll go to the relevant ones here. It looks like, okay, Miles actually transitioned a file from work in progress to pending approval. Looks like he updated the custom properties and changed the 3D view on the drawing, and he looks like he specifically wants me to review the file. That would make sense. I am the primary reviewer for Miles, so I'll go ahead and do that. If I want to, I can go ahead and click on this link here, and it's going to bring me right to the file. So all these links in here are live links and can do various things. Clicking on this one would allow me to open it up in SOLIDWORKS. I can view the file in eDrawings. I can get the latest version in my Explorer or view the data card of the file or the history, the design history of it. But no need to actually make any heavy scrutinization for this particular file because everything looks good here, and I know Miles, he always does great work. So what I can do is just go ahead and approve this file. I think this is fine. I'll go ahead and actually, from my perspective, right-click on this file, and what I can do is actually set this to approved. I don't need to reject this. This looks good. I'll set it to approve. But before I do that, there's a few things that I want to show you back in the workflow that are going to actually happen. So what I'm doing is bringing up the properties for the transition that the file is going to go through when I approve the file. If I click on this Actions tab here, as you can see, there's a few different actions that are going to occur. So first and foremost, I'm going to automatically clear that watermark that's on the file because what I have is pretty much a custom property mapping on that drawing that says as you can see, for reference only. That's being driven by a custom property, and that custom property is also, as we saw, linked up to a data card entry. So I can have an action set up to automatically clear the value of the watermark from Enterprise PDM, which will then, as a result, clear it from my drawing. I'll set the checked by and checked date on my drawing, so it'll imprint Mark's name and the date that Mark checked the file. I'll increment the revision of the file and place that revision number or letter, whatever it is, on the data card as well. I'll export some bill of materials information to XML format because perhaps I have some sort of ERP or MRP system that reads in that information. And also what's really cool is the fact that I can actually create a PDF of this drawing automatically. And that's what's going to happen here. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my drawing and now actually approve it. I'll right-click on it again and approve the drawing. I do have the option to enter some comments here. I'll just say this looks good. No need to notify anybody else. I'll go ahead and click OK. So now, as you could see, the watermark has been removed here. The revision of this particular drawing has been stamped with an A. It did not have a revision previously, so that's good. And if we zoom in here on our previewer, we can see that Mark has actually stamped his name on here. That was an automatic action from Enterprise PDM. And it's showing me the date at which this occurred. So you may not have noticed, but in the background, SOLIDWORKS is also opening up and actually saving the drawing as a PDF. That was also one of the automatic operations that was occurring during that transition. So what's going to happen now is it's going to create a drawing from, create a PDF from that drawing, and I should be able to see it here, which I do. I can go ahead and double click on this, and there's my PDF. This was created from that drawing automatically, and now I can sort of copy this out to anywhere else and share this with anybody that actually doesn't have access maybe to my EPDM vault. So that looks good for now. The other thing I want to show you guys is the search interface inside of Enterprise PDM here. I'm going to go ahead and click on this button here, this Open Search button. So this is another one of those data cards that are present in my vault. This one is specifically a search data card here. This allows me to specify some information, to search based on different values. And what it's doing is actually using also that SQL interface. It's not using any normal Windows search. It's just using the actual SQL interface here. So what I'm going to do just is go ahead and execute my search. And that took maybe about a little less than a second. But just to illustrate how quickly that search can function, this is a full list of every single file that's in my vault, which totals about 2,024 files. And these are all not just in a just a list of items that are non-selectable. These are all selectable, and I can do the same actions to these files as I would through my normal Explorer interface. I can view the data card information, check files in or out, that type of thing. All these are selectable and usable in this particular state. And of course, if you search based on different criteria, it'll narrow down the search just as quickly. But again, that was about 2,024 files coming up in about less than a second. That's, again, showing you the power of that SQL interface there. The other option that I want to show you, a nice little feature with Enterprise PDM, is a feature known as the copy tree. So I'll go back to my trusty miter saw assembly here. And maybe I've created this particular project for a customer, customize it to their specifications, and another customer is perhaps interested in the same one, except they want some additional customizations or ones that are maybe different from my original customer. They have some desire to maintain some of the existing design history in terms of some of my parts, but in terms of the other parts or other components, maybe sub-assemblies, they want to modify those sort of slightly. Now, instead of modifying my entire project and sort of creating a new version, I could, I wouldn't want to do that because I could potentially disrupt my original customer here. I want to sort of please both. So what I'll do is actually make a copy of this particular assembly, but since my new customer said that some of the references, some of the components can be maintained, what I can do is choose to maintain some of those references, and I can use the copy tree tool here to actually accomplish what I'm trying to get after. So I'm going to go ahead and expand this out. And as you can see, what it's doing is it's sort of bringing that contains tab-like interface in here as well, but it's adding an additional column for my interface here, this copy column. I'll get to this in a second, but that's one of the primary features of this. I do have the option to copy files to maybe a zip file, maybe export this outside of my vault, but I'll just do copy files to folder. I can specify a different folder, of course, to dump all of these files. If I have files that are in various paths along my vault, I can choose to preserve those relative paths, include any drawings that are maybe associated with this. If I have serial numbers in my data cards, I can choose to regenerate those serial numbers just so that new serial numbers are actually assigned to the data cards as opposed to the copied serial number, which would make sense. I could name my drawings after the models if I choose to include the drawings. More importantly, though, I can actually choose to use either the latest version of references or the attached version of references. There's not really much of a difference on mine, but as you can see, version 4 or 5 is actually present in this assembly as opposed to version 5 of 5. Version 5 of 5 is actually the latest for this particular assembly, but maybe I'll choose to use the attached version of references. I could transform the file name to however I'd like as well, the target file name. Maybe I want to add a prefix or a suffix, replace some characters in the file with other characters, or rename it with another serial number. I can obviously do that as well. Now back to this view here. As you can see here, I have this copy column with all these checkboxes here. If I leave all these checked, it's actually going to make a copy of the entire assembly and all of the components. But as I mentioned before, my new customer actually wants to just sort of maintain some of the references here. So I have the option to maintain those references. If I want to, I can pick and choose which ones I want to maintain and which ones I want to make new copies of. Perhaps with these particular files here, these 6 files that I've unselected, maybe I want to maintain the reference to the original folder because those files are never going to change. They never will change. So I can just have my new assembly reference those. So I can very easily pick and choose, go through the list here and see which ones I do want to maintain, which ones I don't want to maintain, which ones I want to make 2 copies of, that type of thing. Very, very handy feature here. You can almost think of this as pretty much like a pack and go system, except because you're using this in the vault, it's going to get the latest version of whatever it is on the archive server. If you do not have it, it's going to get it from EPDM. And it won't ignore files that it can't find. It will try to find every single file that you've selected for it to copy. So very, very nice tool here. A couple extra notes here. If anybody is interested in working off-site, you do have this option to work offline. Again, one of the concepts we went over earlier was the fact that you're always working locally when you work inside an enterprise PDM vault. You always have a local cache, and you're always synced up with that server. So every single change that you make, if you check out a file, make changes, check it in, create a new version, that new version is going to be saved back to the server. But I also have the option to work offline if I wanted to. I could get a particular file, check it out, and take ownership, and then I can work offline and take my computer wherever I'd like, maybe on vacation or off-site location, and be assured that I can work on that file locally without having anybody else in my company checking the file out because I have it checked out. And the next time I reconnect and actually work online, reconnect to my vault, I can check in those changes that I've locally saved to my hard drive here. One of the last things I want to talk about here, there's 3 different license types with Enterprise PDM. The highest license type is the CAD editor license. It gives you access to not only the Vault here, the normal Explorer view, but also access to that Enterprise PDM add-in, allowing you to work more seamlessly inside of the Vault with SOLIDWORKS here. The contributor license is the next step down. That's the middle license. That's for people who still need access to the Vault, but don't necessarily have SOLIDWORKS. Perhaps they need to go in and view files, and perhaps you need to go in and maybe check in and edit and check out specific documents, such as these again. With Enterprise PDM, you can store any file type in the Vault. Anything you would store in any Windows folder structure, you can store in here as well. The last license type for Enterprise PDM would be what's known as a viewer license. Those are usually sold in packs of 5, and they're specifically just for viewing the Vault, going in and looking at the data, not necessarily checking out any files and making any edits to them. It's just strictly for viewing, as the name implies. So that's pretty much it for what I had to show you guys today. As I mentioned before, I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you guys have. I'll go ahead and see if anybody asked any. So far, just one question, which is not really a question, but you're welcome. So again, that is it for our Webinar Wednesday presentation. You can feel free to log in any more questions that you have right now. Let me go back to my Indie PowerPoint here, and I'll just sort of show you the upcoming Webinar Wednesday schedule here. So we just went over conquering your data management challenges with Enterprise PDM. Next week, in terms of the e-learning demo, Intro to EPDM API. In the afternoon, the e-demo session will be for simulation in terms of flow simulation applications. Week after that will be an e-learning session on CAMWorks in terms of SceneWorks, CAMWorks integration. That is the title of that. E-demo for that week is also going to be electrical, integrated electrical system design will be the name of that. And for the last week in October, we're going to be focused on the Composer program for the e-learning session, getting more out of Composer. And for the e-demo session, we'll be going over the 3D printing aspect, the capability of 3D printing, an introduction to it, and an overview of it. Again, I'm still going to answer questions, but for now, I'd just like to thank you for attending. Again, my name is Miles Hoffman. There's my email on the screen if you're interested in sort of sending me questions later, if you don't have any questions right now. But let me go ahead and actually see if I can answer a few questions here.